everybody. This is Alice Ginsberg, and today's travelogue is going to center on the city of Jerusalem. Now, we all know that Jerusalem holds a special place in our hearts, but I'd like you to focus on this map for just a second so you can see, well, actually for a few minutes, so you can get a sense of Jerusalem is pretty much here in the center of the map. And then you see the West Bank and you get a sense of Jericho and Bethlehem and Hebron. And up here in the north is Nazareth, where Jesus was from, where he grew up. And you just get a whole geographic sense of proportion. Before we start the pictures, I would like to set the scene. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I remember thee not, if I set not Jerusalem above my utmost joy. That is Psalm 137. When we pray, we face Jerusalem. During the wedding ceremony, we break the glass in memory of Jerusalem's brokenness, even at the moment of our utmost joy, especially at the moment of our utmost joy. She is an integral part of our daily prayers. At two of the most pivotal moments during the Jewish year, Seder night on Passover, and at the end of the longest, most intense day, Yom Kippur, at the culmination of the Ne'ilah service, when the heavenly gates of prayer are closing, we shout with strengthened resolve, L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And those who have already returned to Israel say, L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim Habanuya, next year in the rebuilt Jerusalem. Why remember Jerusalem, and why with such intensity? Because it is the place that God chose, according to Deuteronomy. Of all the places in his creation, this is the most beloved of all. David knew this when he made it the official capital during his reign. He knew that the temple would be built at the very place where Abraham had to offer Yitzchak, where Yaakov saw the ladder to heaven, the place where heaven meets earth. But he also knew that it was neutral territory, not belonging to a single tribe. This is important. This was the Washington, D.C. of the land of Israel. No tribe, none of the Hebrew tribes, none of the Jewish tribes could claim that land. Jerusalem was the chosen place where the chosen people had to meet at chosen times. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at their appointed times. That is in Leviticus. Thousands of pilgrims ascended to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is on a hill 3 times a year for service at the Holy Temple. Jerusalem became the heart, the temple, the inner and most important chamber of that heart. And with the Jewish people continually ascending and returning again and again to their homes, the Torah flowed from Jerusalem, constantly pulsing through Israel's veins, bringing well-being and prosperity to its people. David gives a hint to what this was and will be again. For there were set thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper that love thee. Peace be within thy walls, and prosperity within thy palaces. For my brethren and companions' sakes, I will now say, peace be within thee. For the sake of the house of Adonai, our God, I will seek thy good. Jerusalem, in her peak during the peace reign of Solomon, was the place of godly inspiration, a center where fair and righteous judgment flowed like a healing balm to the people and also to the nations. It was the seat of governance that ruled the people with wisdom and integrity, a legacy left by King David. The well-being of Jerusalem secured the well-being of the people of Israel. That's why David stresses this fact when he says we have to pray for the shalom of Jerusalem. Shalom does not mean peace. The literal translation from the Hebrew is to request, even to petition for the well-being of Jerusalem. The word shalom is generally associated with peace, a word that has been worn thin in the jargon dictionary of politics. But it doesn't mean peace. It means wholeness, balance, and well-being on the deepest level of the soul. Imagine if a person can arrive at such a level. Imagine if a nation can arrive at such a level. Imagine if the most beloved place can again rise to such a level. Then yes, peace will prevail. And this is the meaning of Jerusalem. So here in this map, we see how Jerusalem indents into the West Bank. Now, as I said, Jerusalem is on a hill, and that when you are on this hill, it's a gradual rise. You almost don't even realize you're going up, but when you get there, you definitely realize. When you get to Jerusalem, you realize that you have ascended a hill. And when you look out from East Jerusalem toward the Judean desert, you realize that Jerusalem is the borderline of a watershed. To the west, the land is fertile, the land is green, the land is vibrant. To the immediate east is the Judean desert. So, this is a memorial to the Church of Scotland. And this is important because notice, this stone was laid on May the 7th, 1927, after World War I, okay, by Field Marshal the Viscount Allenby. So Field Marshal Allenby, who was the head of the British Army in the Middle East, laid this stone in commemoration of the liberation of Jerusalem from the Ottomans on December 9th, 1917. And here we are at the Western Wall, otherwise known as the Wailing Wall. And I have several pictures of this site. This is the Kotel. Now, off to the right, you see an elevated passageway with Israeli flags on it. And this is the passageway where people line up in order to get to the Temple Mount. You can only get there 1 or 2 days a week, and they only let in a certain number of people. And it's not just Jewish people, it's tourists, Jews, people from all over the world. The Temple Mount is a Muslim site, and they allow non-Muslims to come on a very limited basis. I've made 4 trips to Israel, but it's only on my second visit that I was able to visit the Temple Mount. And here you see up close the stones of the Wailing Wall. These are Jerusalem stones. The vegetation that sticks out from the stones is carob. it is a massive stone wall, and it was built for the second temple by Hadrian. I love this picture. We have an Orthodox gentleman. He's all dressed. He's at the Wailing Wall, and he's on his cell phone. That's modern Israel. This is a yeshiva, Ma'alot Harav Shlomo Goren, the Rabbi Shlomo Goren. Notice it overlooks the Kotel. Notice the menorah on top, the Israeli flag flying, but notice that the signage is in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. On the side, it's just in Hebrew, and it says it is a house of learning to Rabbi Goren. Here's another view. This is a view of what's known as Robinson's Arch. It's one corner of the Western Wall, and there is quite a lot of archaeological work going on here, excavating the Jerusalem that was right next to the Temple Mount. This black dome is a Muslim mosque, and this tower over here to the left is a Muezzin's tower. The Muezzin calls Muslims to prayer from this tower 5 times a day. And notice over to the right, there is a cemetery, which we will visit in more detail. There's a hill here full of graves. That is Mount Zion. And these trees off to the extreme right here, these trees mark the site of the grave of the founder of Hadassah. We are at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and there is a sculpture here very much like the bean here in Chicago's Millennium Park. And this is my husband trying to take a picture of himself in this modern sculpture. The gentleman in blue is our guide, who is now our personal friend. His name is Yisrael Garfinkel, and I'm in the white blouse here. Modern Jerusalem. This is the Knesset, Israeli's parliament, 120 seats. This is the sculpture I was telling you about, where my husband was lying down trying to take his picture in the sculpture. And again, this is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Here we are on the Temple Mount. As I said, it took me 2 visits in order to be able to gain access here. And you can see that there are a lot of tourist groups here on the day that I was here. You're only allowed to go, it's 1 or 2 mornings per week. And after that, they actually clear the Temple Mount of all tourists and non-Muslims. This dome here, the black dome, is the same one I showed you in the former photo. Yeah, I snuck this picture. These are gentlemen who are on the Temple Mount, and they are studying the Quran. There were several groups like this all over the Temple Mount. As you can see, the tree is very old. This is Al-Aqsa. This is the 3rd holiest site in the Muslim religion after Mecca and Medina. This is the site where Abraham brought his son Yitzchak to offer him as a sacrifice to God. This is the site from which Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven. These are pictures of the Temple Mount. You can see that it was a great edifice in its time. And this is Al-Aqsa. Now, you might remember from my tour of India that Muslims do not decorate their buildings with images of people or animals. Instead, they decorate their building with sayings in Arabic. And you can see this all around the roof of Al-Aqsa. A view from, actually it's from Gethsemane. Now, Gethsemane, if you're familiar with Christian tradition, Catholic tradition, or Greek Orthodox tradition, you will know that Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, where all these olive trees are. And then from there, he was taken to Calvary. But just outside the Garden of Gethsemane, there is this absolutely gorgeous Greek Orthodox church. We're back at the Temple Mount, and it's actually a very large place. Gives you some idea of scale. A street in East Jerusalem. So if you read your Bible and you go to Kings, I think it's Kings 1, it might be Kings 2, you will read that Jerusalem was inhabited by the Jebusites, and the Assyrians laid siege to the city. But the Jebusites dug a water tunnel, and it's a fabulous archaeological feat. It is on a slope, which is the exactly correct slope to bring water from the hill, water from outside the walls of Jerusalem, inside to the city of Jerusalem, so that they could withstand the Assyrian siege. And when David wanted to take the city of Jerusalem, he sent a lieutenant of his to climb through the water tunnel and infiltrate into the city of Jerusalem. You can walk this very water tunnel. It's a place called Ir David, the city of David. I have walked this water tunnel 5 times. Every time it's a thrilling experience. It's very narrow, it's very dark. It was hacked through the rock. And at one spot in the rock, you can see that when it was originally built, you can see that it was built from 2 ends toward the middle. And you can see where the tools are in an inverted V, you can see where the 2 sides met underground to complete the tunnel. Now, when you come out of that tunnel, and it's about 5/8 of a mile long, you come out at a pool, and it was a cleansing pool. And right beside it are the steps that led up to the temple itself. And these steps alternate, one wide, one narrow, one wide, one narrow. Why? So that as the high priest would ascend to the temple and with his retinue behind him, He would have to go slowly, and he would have to pause at each of the wide steps. When you come out from that, you actually come out on this street. It's in a neighborhood called Silwan, and Silwan is a Palestinian neighborhood. This is the entrance to Ir David, because David, of course, played the harp and the lyre. Lyre, the lyre. And you can see it's patrolled. You know, this is an Israeli soldier here to the lower right. It's very difficult. You cannot take a camera into the tunnel. First of all, it's extremely dark. It's so dark that they actually give you a lamp, a small flashlight to take with you so that you can navigate it properly when you walk. And because you need both hands to sometimes navigate the narrowness, and you have to bend down at places to get through the tunnel, there would be no way that you could have a camera with you. We're in a very different place right now. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre contains 3 of the stations of the cross. The building itself houses 3 different chapels of 3 different religions. And this is one of those chapels. Let me see if I can name some of them for you. There is a Roman Catholic chapel, a Greek Orthodox. There's the Chapel of Constantine's mother, Helena. There is an Ethiopian chapel on the roof. There's a Syrian chapel. There is an Ottoman chapel, and I'm missing one. I can't remember what the 7th one is. I am sorry. But this is one of the chapels in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The ceiling. Check out those mosaics. It's a mosaic of Jesus, and he is prone here, and people are weeping. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is on the site of Calvary Hill. You can see all the various types of people here in this picture who have come to worship here. A mosaic again of Jesus. Here he is prone after he died on the cross. He was brought here and laid out and bathed before he was buried. That is what the legend tells us. Get a better view of this. The people with halos are saints. This is Mary Magdalene. This is St. Peter, and I'm actually not sure which saint it is here in the center. And this is the actual stone on which people believe Jesus was laid to be bathed. One of the other chapels. I believe this is the Syrian Chapel. This is the site where people believe, where Catholics believe, in particular, that where Jesus is buried before he arose from the grave, as is widely accepted in Christian tradition. And now we're back to Jewish tradition. Here we are at the Western Wall with Al-Aqsa in the background, the Musain's Tower in the background, and what you're seeing here is the men's side for prayer at the wall, beyond the umbrellas. There's a men's side and a women's side. It is divided. And when you go to Israel, you can take a tour, which I did, and go behind the wall. And over here, there's these archways here. That's how you get into the path behind the wall. And you can actually walk on the same stones. You get to see where the Western Wall meets the bedrock. And you can actually walk on the Hasmonean stones of the Second Temple. It is quite the moving experience. Here you can see there is an army contingent here. These soldiers had just completed some advanced training, and the green and white flags are the flags of their regiment, and they have attained a higher rank by completing this course, and they are about to celebrate at the wall. New recruits for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, are inducted at Masada, which we will visit in another travelogue. The lowest ranks of the Israeli army are commissioned at Masada, but when Israeli troops complete advanced training, typically that is recognized here at the wall. And here we have an Ethiopian bride coming to the wall for her wedding. It's a very busy but a very moving place. There's all sorts of things going on all at the same time, practically every day at the Western Wall. And this is the Western Wall, and in its crevices, people, as you can see, jam their requests. And yes, I jammed a few pieces of paper in here myself. Every week, the Kohanim come and clean out the crevices and burn the messages so that the words can ascend to heaven, to God. This I took on my tour in back of the Western Wall, okay? And it was one of the few pictures I could take that came out. You could see at the bottom, you could see pictures of the excavation that happened. But the model is of Hadrian's the second temple in Hadrian's time. And you could see how the wall went into the hill and meets the bedrock here. You could see the second temple in the center. This is how the Temple Mount would have looked in Hadrian's time, shortly before the turn of the century, from BC to AD. And this is Shabbat. This is Kabbalat Shabbat at the Western Wall. You could see there are still Israeli soldiers here, and the very back against the arches are a group of Haredim, of ultra-Orthodox. Everyone sings and dances and celebrates the Shabbat. Now, I will tell you that I took this picture and I was kind of above, on a staircase kind of above the kotel, and it was a very warm evening. I had on a pair of very nice slacks and a sleeveless shell, and then I had a fancy blouse on over my shell. and I went to take my fancy blouse off because it was so warm. You could see from the flags there was very little wind, and a young Israeli soldier in uniform with her gun, her weapon slung over her back, tapped me on the shoulder and told me to put my blouse back on. Here we are at Yad Vashem, the famous picture of the broken pillars, and they are broken to symbolize the brokenness of the Jewish people as they suffered during the Holocaust. One of my favorite sculptures at Yad Vashem, there was a Jewish orphanage. There was an orphanage where there were Jewish boys taken in. The man in charge of the orphanage was not Jewish, and he accompanied his charges to the gas chamber, and he died there. And this is a sculpture to his memory. This is a great photo, not because it's my husband and me, but because it shows you at the end of your path through the museum at Yad Vashem. And you can only go one way. You have to keep going in one prescribed way from one room to another. You cannot skip around. And you walk through Yad Vashem and you come out here. And it is so inspiring because you come from the Holocaust to this platform. There are two of these sculptures, one like this on one side, one on the other side, and they are shaped like ships, like the prow of a ship. And what you're looking out on is the Jewish National Fund forest, full of living trees that have been planted and maintained by living Jews. And it is a very moving, very emotional view. The menorah at Yad Vashem. The shrubbery is carved. The shrubbery is maintained to say Yad Vashem. It's sculpted that way. I hope that you can pick this out. It's the Hebrew for Herzl, Theodor Herzl's grave. His remains were brought here to Israel as he requested after the Jewish state was established in 1948. We are at the Memorial Cemetery, Mount Herzl, where all the famous Israeli leaders and soldiers, it's like their Arlington National Cemetery, and they're all buried here. You have Zalman Shazar and his wife here. This is their grave, his wife Rachel. Yitzhak Rabin. Golda Meir. And these are views of the graves of Israeli soldiers who have died in battle to defend the state of Israel. Each one of them has a yahrzeit box here where you put a yahrzeit candle and light it for the anniversary of their memory. This is the memorial on Mount Herzl to people who were killed by suicide bombers. And they have no graves because their bodies were so shattered and blown to pieces that there's nothing left, there's nothing to be buried in a grave. This is our guide, Yisrael Garfinkel, and he is showing me the name of his niece, who was blown up in one of the attacks on one of the local buses in Jerusalem at the beginning of the 21st century. And here we are in Meccano Yehuda. This is a market where you can buy all kinds of foods. It's a very busy place on a Friday afternoon. And at about 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock in the winter, everything goes on deep discount because they have to clean everything out before Shabbat. It's a bustling place. People kind of shove and push each other they're always in a hurry and they're trying to get what they want. And it's a very loud, raucous place. Some of the counters in Meccano Yehuda. The numbers are Israeli shekels. Here's your olive merchant. And this is taken in the David Citadel, okay? On Shabbat, very little is open. You cannot go down to the Kotel, and there's not much open in the old city as it happens, but the David Citadel Museum is open. And we visited it after we were privileged to have lunch, Shabbat lunch, with a rabbi teacher at one of the yeshivot that border the Kotel, and we got to eat lunch with the Shore family. She is an artist, Rebecca Shore, and the father is a teacher. They have 10 children. They'd been married, when we met them, they had been married 20 years and had 10 children. We were not the only guests at this lunch, as it happened. They are a modern Orthodox family, and it was quite clear that 3 of the young men at the table were viewed as would-be suitors for their eldest daughter. This was taken in the museum. It is a model, as you can see, of the city of David. This is the city of Jerusalem in biblical times. Here is the Temple Mount in the corner, about the middle of your screen, the upper middle of your screen. It depicts the Judean desert in the background, and it depicts the various buildings on the Temple Mount. A sculpture showing the Jews being driven off as slaves by the Emperor Titus. And this is a depiction of what Robinson's Arch must have looked like in biblical times, where you have the city at the lower level, and here you would have had all your merchants selling items for use on the Temple Mount. You need to remember that Jerusalem at one time was a Roman city. So it was the city of David, the city of Solomon, and around the time of Jesus, it was a Roman city. And you would walk up these steps here to get to the Temple Mount up here in the upper part of your picture. We're now in a very interesting room within the walls of Old Jerusalem. This room is an example of architecture in Jerusalem, where you have buildings that are layer upon layer upon layer of history. So in this particular building, it is believed David's tomb was at one time in the cellar. Above, there are Crusader pillars. And then there is the Muslim Ashram here, and the stairs going up where the imam would walk to get up here to give his sermon. And that would have been from Mamluk and Ottoman times. Here is a replica model of Al-Aqsa. And on Shabbat, it's customary to take a walk because there in Jerusalem, most of the shops are closed. There's very little traffic on the streets. Tel Aviv, by comparison, is still a vibrant city on Shabbat, but Jerusalem goes dormant. And we took a walk and we went to this small community, which was the first suburb of Old Jerusalem. And it was built by Moses Montefiore, and he built this windmill. This is the landmark of the neighborhood. Would have been built in the late 19th, early 20th century. This is modern Jerusalem. You could see this was taken from Herzl, Mount Zion. So this is East Jerusalem in the foreground. You see the walled city of Jerusalem in the middle with Al-Aqsa. The Western Wall is on the other side of Al-Aqsa. You cannot see it in this picture. And you see modern Western Jerusalem stretching beyond the old city. Here's a view of Herzl. You see all the graves. And this is a view of East Jerusalem. Over here, where there's this tower and these trees, to the left, this is Mount Scopus. This is where Hebrew University is. Another view of Jerusalem, old and new. Here we have the menorah that you find at the Knesset, on the grounds of the Knesset, Israel's parliament. It's pretty elaborate. You could see how elaborate it is. And here you could see just how massive it is. Now remember, this is a menorah. This is not a Chanukiah. And you can tell because it only has 7 candelabra. This is a replica of what a menorah would have looked like in the temple. This is another type of sculpture having to do with light. This is from the inside of the Supreme Court of Israel. And you are looking at an artist's depiction of the light of wisdom. Also in the Supreme Court, this art piece, which shows the insignias of the 12 tribes of Israel. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zevulun, Dan, Naphtali, and Yosef Binyamin. Here we have a mosaic in the Supreme Court, the Lion of Judah. We are now on Ammunition Hill. In 1948, this is where the battle for the city of Jerusalem was waged. And the Jews built these narrow, labyrinthine trenches all over the hill in order to defend it from the Arab forces, which greatly outnumbered them. This is looking out from one of the bunkers within those trenches. So you can see the bunker, and this is the site you saw when you looked out. I walked these trenches. It was quite the experience. So you walk the trench and you walk in through here to the bunk, and here's another bunker. You can see exactly, you're here at the bottom, you're in the trench, and up here you have bunkers, and you had the oncoming Arab legions. 1948. Gives you some sense. These are bullet holes and artillery shell. And this is the memorial to the people who died, the men who died defending Ammunition Hill. They are buried on Har Zion, but there's this memorial wall here on Ammunition Hill as well. So when you are on Har Zion, you look out over the city of Jerusalem as you look west, but as you look east, you see, as I mentioned before, Jerusalem is on the edge of a watershed. This is the Judean desert. And what you see here is the major highway going through the West Bank, and you can see the wall that's been built to keep out, or to make more difficult, I should say, make it more difficult for terrorists to infiltrate. On one side of the watershed, there's a good amount of rainfall every year. On this side of the watershed, I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think the statistic is something like 7 to 8 inches of rain per year. This is the other side. I just turned around and took this view. I turned around from looking at the Judean desert to this view. And you are at close to the top here of Har Zion. Now, there are several gates to the walled city of Jerusalem: the Zion Gate, the Dung Gate, the Jaffa Gate, the Lion's Gate. I think I said the Zion Gate, but the one right here that's kind of rocked over, the one that leads directly to Al-Aqsa, and it led directly to the Temple Mount, that was called the Golden Gate. I'm sorry, here it is, right here. Look to the right, and you'll see a small tower here in the wall, and that's the Golden Gate. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem. Gives you a good view of the walls that surrounds the Temple Mount. This is not the Western Wall, by the way. This is the Eastern Wall. This is the Church of All Nations in the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane is directly below Har Zion. When you go to Israel, one of the things that's quite amazing is how close everything is to everything else. Here we have a view of Herzl and individuals who are buried here. Another view, and here you see the Greek Orthodox Church. Gethsemane. Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. These olive trees are pretty old. The Church of All Nations. Every nation that contributed to building this church for the peace of all nations has an insignia dedicated to it on the inside. Here we are in an ashram. This is not the Church of All Nations anymore. This is the same room that I was telling you about that has Crusader columns. You could see the Crusader ceiling here with the vaulted ceiling. And this is a Mamluk window. Mamluks preceded the Ottomans. And here you have your Muslim ashraf. One of the columns. You see Herodian stones in this room, vaulted ceilings. You see history upon history in this room. It's an up close of the stained glass window. Here we are back in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The balcony up here that is in the center of the photo, legend has it, or Christian tradition has it, this is where Jesus was tried and given his crown of thorns. Very difficult to make out, but this is Jesus with the Greek Orthodox symbol behind him for Christos. Part of the ceiling there. The Zion Gate to the old city of Jerusalem. Check out the bullet holes. Something you will see in Israel that I dare say you will not see in very many other places in the world. A shop advertising a Torah scribe, a sofer. On the same street, you've got your pizzeria, Basti, but it also has Oriental food. Go figure. Oh, let's just check out, see what this young man is wearing. This is a Palestinian gentleman, and he has on a t-shirt, a protest t-shirt. Specializing in old Russian icons. The signage in Jerusalem is Arabic, Hebrew, and English. It's the old city side of the Jaffa Gate. This is the front of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Ethiopian church is on the top, on the roof. Again, the stone where Jesus is said to have been bathed when he was taken down from the cross. Inside views again of the church. Again, Jesus' burial place. Now, I will tell you that according to Catholic tradition and Anglican tradition, this is where Jesus was buried before he arose and was resurrected. In some Protestant traditions, notably the Methodist tradition, there is another story, and that is that Jesus is buried in a place called the Garden Tomb on land that belonged to a man named Joseph of Arimathea. But Catholic tradition and Anglican tradition maintain that Jesus was buried on Calvary Hill. The Roman insignia inside the church. One of the chapels. And we are now back in modern Israel, as you can see. This is a sculpture of a soldier at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Also, right next to the Israel Museum is the Shrine of the Book. This is the building in which the Dead Sea Scrolls are housed. But you also see a Roman sarcophagus. Again, you have history upon history upon history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Roman sarcophagus, and then you have this modern sculpture of an Israeli soldier. More Roman remains. These are from a Roman sarcophagus. And at the Israel Museum, there is a huge model of the city of Jerusalem to scale. And it shows, you could see the walled city of Jerusalem. It's an amazing detail. And I have focused this particular photo on the temple and the Holy of Holies and the Temple Mount surrounding it. This would have been in Solomon's time. And you could see there's a fortress here over to the right. And here's some of the details showing the streets and the city of Jerusalem. This was when the population of Jerusalem, they all lived within the bounds of the wall. And here you have the Roman amphitheater. So you have the temple as it survived from Solomon's time in the Roman city of Jerusalem with the Roman amphitheater. It's an amazing model. Could probably spend all day here. The fortress where the Roman soldiers were garrisoned. Jerusalem at the time of the Second Temple. It's a mosaic showing the various sites. Yerushalayim b'yimei habet hasheni. Jerusalem at the time of the Second Temple. On the same grounds, you have this whimsical sculpture garden. Some very interesting sculptures. This is the famous one, Ahava, love. And this last photo is a metal sculpture by Frank Meisler. And you can purchase this in various sizes. This, I think, is a medium-sized one. There's a small version and a very large version. And this is Frank Meisler's, who is a living artist. This is his depiction of the city of Jerusalem with the temple at the top and all the buildings and so on, surrounded by the wall. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem. And that concludes our travelogue for today. I hope you have enjoyed visiting what I call the city of hope and the city of peace, in the sense of peace as well-being. Thank you very much. Toda Rabba.
Thank you so much for joining us today. For more videos, please visit www.cje.net/cyberclub.